I'm Ben Garthus, and I'm the co-lead of Biomodd, along with Angelo Vermeulen and a whole other host of people that have been working on this project. Biomodd is basically a project that brings technology and plants together in a way and makes them have this sort of like synergistic relationship. And so I guess the core principle, or one of the things that sort of shows up in all the different biomods, is this idea of using the waste heat from the computers to make like an ideal growing environment for the plants. Biomodd is based around this idea of creating a synergistic relationship between plants and technology. There's a bunch of different ways that this happens. One is that the waste heat from the computers is used to is captured and used to make an ideal growing environment for the plants. There's also things where like the plants are actually used to cool the computers. So for instance, there's an algae computer down in the main structure that cycles water with algae through the processor, and rather than using coolant, the algae is used to cool the processor, and it also helps the algae grow. There's also a video game, or this sort of virtual world, that is used to control robotic caretakers in the window garden, and it's a sort of feedback loop. So there is sensors in the window garden that tell the virtual world when like the moisture levels are low, when the light levels are low, all these different things, and that data gets fed back into the video game and sort of shapes that world and sort of dictates the way that the game is played. And so by playing the game, it triggers the different robotic caretakers that are needed to kind of satisfy those deficiencies. This is part of the window garden. This humidifier is actually kind of part of the robotic caretaker. I guess it's a little bit of a simpler version of it, but basically, when the humidity levels get low, the humidifier gets triggered, and it kind of, sprays this mist over the plants.
Well, I've worked on Biomodd before in Delft, and when I started, I thought it was a round system, that the energy was produced out of the system, but that's not yet that far. And then I got really interested in building a computer, and so the first time it was all the first time, and now it's the second time I built that part.
And specifically, I worked on the solar component here, which is all these guys, which is attempting, as Isabelle was saying before, ultimately this wants to be a closed loop system. It's not quite there yet, but this is the first step in doing that. This is the first Biomodd that features solar power. So basically this is an exploded solar panel that's rigged up, all connected together, and then bring it down with these two wires, and then ultimately hooked up to a battery down here, and then power access over here. Currently there's nothing hooked up to it, but the plan is to eventually at the end of the night or by tomorrow morning to hook up these purple lights to it, so then it's always receiving energy and it's giving the plants the light that it needs.
At this point, the Biomodd network that we have here in New York Hall of Science is a local network, but there is definitely personal interest, and within the team to open it up to a broader, to a worldwide audience through internet. But that would require more R&D on how precisely we would allow or create a system that makes sense, because what you have is like a biological system that is first of all very sensitive, very small, and then a massive potential audience. And to balance that out, I think we need some good thinking. The idea of robotic caretaking, that's how we call it. It's been part of the discourse of Biomodd since its inception, since the beginning. But here in New York, it's the first time that we actually managed to put it into place. And the system that we create, we call it entangled reality. So you have a virtual world and an ecosystem. And within the ecosystem, you have different types of sensors that measure the state of the ecosystem and the environment, like humidity, temperature, growth rate, all those sort of things. These data are being fed real time into the game world. So the game world is constantly being readjusted according to what happens in the real ecosystem, which is an interesting link. But then, and this is where it becomes really, really interesting, we allow the virtual world to respond. We give it agency over the ecosystem. So we allow the virtual world to physically manipulate the ecosystem through caretaking robotics. And it can range from a diversity of watering robotics to cutters to lighting that is being adjusted to all different types of things with which you can physically take care of the ecosystem. And what happens then, if you combine those two pathways, the pathway of the sensors towards the virtual world and the pathway of the virtual world towards the physical ecosystem, you get an entangled reality. Because cause and effect become entangled. You imagine the virtual world responding to changes in the ecosystem. Immediately, the virtual world will start manipulating the ecosystem. And these changes set off a new series of changes within the virtual world. So you get an interesting feedback loop, which is, like I said, the first time that we actually implemented it in Biomodd. This is gameplay. If you create a virtual world and you allow people to interact, you have to define your gameplay, and it's a very specific set of rules that you define. And we basically work like this. The artificial intelligence is enabled to take care of the ecosystem, but only when there is a collaboration between players and the artificial intelligence. So the players themselves can't directly impact the ecosystem, neither can the artificial intelligence, but they have to cooperate, and then things can change. So that's how we made the three systems, the ecological, technological, and social system, fully integrated and connected. We focus exclusively on food. This is urban agriculture. Every single plant being grown in the Biomodd project here is related to agriculture and can potentially be consumed. And the space we're sitting here now we call it a social space. This is the space where we share the food, we have discussions, we can use it for performative events. So it's also the first part that we have a component like this. And another interesting part is that the social dynamics of Biomodd have strongly matured over time. To such an extent that we have a very complex combination of people from different backgrounds here in New York. First of all, there's the locally based New York creatives and people that were interested to join us. But we also worked with the Corona community here in Queens, living around the museum, who are mostly 95% Hispanic. And for example, one of the things that I did within the Biomodd project was showing local families, mothers and children, how to take apart old broken computers and how to build new machines with that, and then showing them how you can be creative with this process, with great success, because now, in Corona, these women are going to set up their own computer building workshops. So that's how we really reached out to that. And on top of that, on top of the super local layer and then the New York larger context, several team members from former Biomodd projects came over to New York to join this group of people. So it's really an incredible community of people